Now I will explain. So the next topic in language fundamentals, the most valuable topic, very important topic for the interview room especially, types of variables. Keep subheading, types of variables, types of variables, types of variables, variables, types of variables, variables. Okay, now just observe types of variables. Do you know, based on the value represented by a variable, okay, there are two types of divisions actually. Division 1 based on the type of value, second division based on the behavior, based on the functionality. So division 1, let me talk. First keep subheading, division 1, division 1, division 1. Okay, so just observe, based on the type of value represented by a variable, all variables are divided into two categories, right? Do you know, sir, I'm taking int x, int x is equal to 10. I'm taking. Can you tell for which purpose we are using x? For which purpose we are using x? To represent one int value 10. Int is a primitive, right? This type of variable is by default considered primitive variables. Are you getting? This type of thing is nothing more by default considered as what? Primitive variables, right? Okay, we can use primitive variables. So we can use, there are some variables which can be used to represent primitive values. Such type of variables are by default considered as what? Primitive variables, right? Is it clear for all of you, right? Now sometime I can use a variable, I can use a variable to represent reference value. I can use a variable to represent, to refer object, Sir, student S is equal to new student, S is pointing to object. Are you getting? Student S is equal to new student, S is pointing to object. Such type of variables are by default considered reference variables, right? Are you getting the point, right? Okay, this is, sir, the variables which can be used to represent primitive values, primitive variable. The variables which can be used to refer object is nothing but what? Reference variables, right? Are you able to understand? So based on the type of value represented by a variable, all variables are divided into two types, primitive variables, reference variables, right? Now I hope is clear, okay, at this point. Based on type of value represented by a variable, based on type of value represented by a variable, based on type of value represented by a variable, all variables are divided into, all variables are divided into, all variables are divided into two types, divided into two types. First one, divided into two types. First one, primitive variables. First one, primitive variables. First one, primitive variables. Keep subheading. Primitive variables. Keep subheading. Can be used to represent primitive values. Can be used to represent primitive values. Can be used to represent primitive values. Primitive values. Example, int x is equal to 10. 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 Okay, next, keep subheading. Reference variables. Yeah. Can be used to refer objects. 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 To refer objects. Okay, example, student S is equal to new student. Student S is equal to new student. Student S is equal to new student. Okay, take this diagram. S is pointing to object. S is pointing to object. That's all. Are you able to understand? Sir, based on the value represented by a variable, all the variables are divided into how many categories? Two categories: primitive variable, reference variable, right? In this division, other than this, nothing is there. Are you getting? Other than this, nothing is there. But there is another division is there which is more important. Are you getting? So there are instance variable, static variable, local variable, like another division which is very important for the entire room, even for day-to-day programming also. Keep subheading division 2. Division 2. Yeah, division 2. Yeah, the point here see. So based on position of declaration. Sir, where I declare a variable? Am I declared within a class or within a method? Like based on position of declaration and behavior, all variables are divided into three categories, right? Sir, what is the first one? First type ana instance variables. Second one, okay, static variables. Instance variables, static variables. The third one, local variables, right? Third one, local variables, like. I hope are you able to understand. Now this division is a very important division for the entire room, even for day-to-day programming also. Okay, at this point, based on position of declaration, and the behavior, based on the position of declaration and behavior, all variables are divided into three types. All variables are divided into three types. And instance variables, static variables, local variables, instance variables, static variables, local variables, instance variables, static variables, local variables, local variables. Okay, now keep subheading instance variables. Okay, now sir, what is instance variable? Okay, now observe this one. Best example to understand this concept. Sir, I'm taking class student. For every student, compulsory name must be required. For every student, compulsory roll number must be required. Assume every student having the name and roll number. Now I'm taking string name, okay, int roll number, like string name into roll number, like this I'm taking. For every student, name and roll number must be required. Okay, now if I create, sir, first student I'm creating, sir, first student S1, second student S2 I'm taking, S600, like this I'm taking. Okay, name some first student name Ravi, roll number is nothing but some 101, assume Ravi 101. Second student name is nothing but some Durga, roll number 102, name some Shiva, roll number some 600, like this I'm taking. Are you getting? Just observe the value of name and variable. The value of name and variable is name and roll number is varied from object to object. Correct or not? First student name and roll number is the different. Second student name and roll number is the different. The value of a variable is varied from object to object. Such type of variables are called instance variables, right? Sir, here the value of name for the first object name is Ravi, second object name is Shiva or Durga, last object name is nothing but Shiva, like. Sir, the value of name varied from object to object. The value of roll number varied from object to object. such type of variables are by default considered instance variables, right? Any explanation is required, Anna? Sir, what is instance variable? If the value of a variable varied from object to object, such type of variables are called instance variables, right? Now, sir, for every object, how many copies of instance variables are there? For every object, a separate copy of instance variables will be created. Suppose 600 students are there in the classroom. Then how many roll numbers are there? 600. How many names are there? 600 names. So here for every object, a separate copy of name and roll number by default will be created. Okay, such type of variables are by default considered as what? Instance variables, right? Now not required to keep much explanation. Sir, only 2 points. Sir, what is instance variable? Okay, if the value of a variable varied from object to object, such type of variables are called instance variable. How many copies of instance variables will be created? For every object, a separate copy of instance variable will be created. Okay, add these 2 points first. Better to take point by point. Instance variables under that first point. If the value of a variable, if the value of a variable is varied from, if the value of a variable is varied from object to object, if the value of a variable is varied from object to object, such type of variables are called instance variables. If the value of a variable is varied from object to object, such type of variables are called instance variables. Such type of variables are called instance variables. Such type of variables are called instance variables. Are you getting? Second point. For every object, a separate copy of instance variables. For every object, a separate copy of instance variables. A separate copy of instance variables will be created. For every object, a separate copy of instance variables will be created. Are you able to understand, right? Sir, what is instance variable? Okay, like, sir, now let me explain a bit in detail. Here, see, where we have to declare instance variables, Anna. Sir, instance variables should be declared within the class directly. Correct or not? Sir, class test. Here I am taking int x is equal to 10. So can I use the term, is it an instance variable or not? Yes, boss. Instance variable should be declared within the class directly, but outside of any method or block or constructor. Sir, if I declare any variable inside a method, sir, within the method int x is equal to 10. Can you tell what is this variable, Anna? Local variable, right? Sir, if I declare any variable inside a constructor, sir, what is this variable? Local variable, right? If I declare any variable inside a block, it may be static block, instance block, or for loop, anything within a block. If I declare a variable, this variable is always what? Local variable, right? That's why instance variable should be declared within a class directly, but outside of any method or block or constructor. Are you getting right? Outside of any method or block or constructor. Okay, I hope is clear, sir. Where we have to declare instance variables, right? Okay, add instance variables should be declared. Instance variables should be declared within the class directly. Within the class directly, but outside of any method. Within the class directly, but outside of any method or block or constructor. Should be declared within the class directly, but outside of any method, or block or constructor. Outside of any method or block or constructor. Okay, this is, I hope you people can aware, right? Okay, next, sir, when instance variable will be created, Instance variable will be created at the time of object creation. Sir, when the student got created is nothing but when the student name got created at the time of student object creation. When the roll number will be created at the time of student object creation. That's why instance variables will be created at the time of object creation. Okay, because instance variable is always part of what? Object. Regarding part of object. That's why at the time of object creation, instance variable will be created. At the time of object destruction, instance variable by default will be gone. That's why scope of instance variable is exactly same as scope of object. If object is there in the memory, automatically instance variable is there. If the object is not there, instance variable gone. Observe the difference right at this point. Instance variable will be created. Instance variable will be created. Instance variable will be created. Will be created. Instance variable will be created at the time of object creation. Instance variable will be created at the time of object creation. At the time of object creation. Under destroyed. At the time of object destruction. Under destroyed at the time of object destruction. Under destroyed at the time of object destruction. At the time of object destruction. Hence the scope of instance variable is exactly same as the scope of instance variable is exactly same as the scope of instance variable is exactly same as the scope of object. Is exactly same as the scope of object. The scope of instance variable is exactly same as the scope of object. The scope of object. Okay, that's all. Third point also clear. Now the fourth conclusion, analogy. So at what time it got created, at what time it got destroyed, what is the scope? Clear. Can you tell where instance variable will be saved or will be stored? Where the objects will be stored? In the heap memory. Are you getting? In the heap memory. Instance variable is the part of object. That's why where object got stored, there only instance variable also will be stored. Objects will be stored in the heap memory. Obviously, instance variable also will be saved where? In the heap memory. Yeah, the part of object. Clear, right? In which memory area instance variables will be saved? Okay, add. Instance variables will be stored. Instance variables will be stored. Instance variables will be stored in the heap memory. Instance variables will be stored in the heap memory. Will be stored in the heap memory as a part of object. Instance variables will be stored in the heap memory as the part of object. As the part of object. Okay, this is one point. Next, now take very special care. Sir, I am taking int x is equal to an instance variable, right? But how we can access instance variable? What are various possibilities? Like, sir, public static void main method. Public static void main method string array accept. Public static void main string array accept. Now, test t1 is equal to new test. Analogy. Before that, just observe this one. So public static void main. Now I am taking SOP of x. Now I am taking SOP of x. Sir, can you tell is it valid or invalid? Ayo, SOP of x. Is it valid or invalid? This one, valid or invalid? Invalid. Compile time error we are going to get, because main method is a static method. Static method means nowhere related to object. Nowhere related to object. Static method means nowhere related to object. But sir, here it is the static, nowhere related to object. Instance variable is always part of object. Sir, without having object, main method can be executed. Without having the object, instance variable, there is no chance. Then how you can? Is nothing but immediately compile time error we are going to get saying non-static variable x, cannot be referenced, cannot be referenced from a static context, cannot be referenced from a static context like compiled by default we are going to get. Are you able to understand that? Okay, this is. So make sure, sir, from the static area we can't access instance variables directly because it is nowhere related to object, but instance variable is always part of object. That's why the problem. Then how you can access? Sir, I'm taking test t is equal to new test. Sir, I'm creating test object. Test is equal to new test. System.out.println t.x, SOP of t.x. Can you tell, is it valid or not? SOP of t.x valid or not? Valid. What is the output by default we are going to get? 10. So from static area we can access instance variable by using object reference. Clear for all of you, right? Similarly, sir, I have m1 method is there, public void m1. Sir, what is this method? This method is instance method, public void m1, instance method. Instance method always we have to call on the object only. So within the, if I am accessing SOP of x, that object x value by default we are going to get. Is it valid or not? Yes, it is always related to object related variable only. What is the problem? That's why valid. Now the conclusion here is, instance variable from static area we can't access directly, but by using object reference we can access. But from instance area we can access instance variable directly, no problem at all. Are you able to understand how we can access? What options are there at this point? We can't access instance variables directly. We can't access instance variables directly. Instance variables directly from static area. We can't access instance variables directly from static area. But we can access by using object reference. Object reference. Okay, clear, right? I hope you people can aware. Next, sir, can I access instance variables directly from instance area? Yes, boss, instance method we can access. Next para. But we can access instance variables. Directly from instance area. That's all. Are you able to understand clearly? There is no doubt at all. Are you getting the point, right? Okay, this is. So take this example. Take clearly. So we can't access instance variables directly from static area. Okay, this is. I hope terminology is very clear for you. Okay, public void M1 SOP of X. So not required to keep much explanation about this one. Next, here say. Okay. So the next point, for instance variables, if I am not providing initialization, sir, I don't want to provide any initialization, right? Sir, just observe class test int x. Sir, can you tell what is this variable, Anna? Instance variable double D boolean B, double D boolean B. Next, string S, string S, int x double D boolean B string S is nothing but like string S. Public static void main method string array args. Sir, all these are instance variables. Okay, I am not providing initialization. Now let me create an object. Tester T1 is equal to new tester SOP T1 dot x, SOP T1 dot D, SOP T1 dot B, SOP T1 dot S. T1 dot S is nothing but like. Can you tell what is the output by default we are going to get? Yeah, I'm not providing any values, but I'm trying to print simple word. For instance variable, we are not required to perform initialization explicitly. JVM will always provide default values, right? That's why T1 dot x is nothing but what? 0. Default value for int, default value for double 0.0, default value for boolean false, default value for string null, like this. Are you getting the point? Sir, for instance variable, we are not required to perform initialization explicitly. JVM will always provide what? Default values, right? Add. For instance variables, instance variables, JVM will always provide default values. 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 And we are not required to perform initialization. And we are not required to perform initialization. And we are not required to perform initialization explicitly. And we are not required to perform initialization explicitly. Not required to perform initialization explicitly. Okay, now take this example. Class test int x double D boolean B string S. Test T1 is equal to new test SOP of T1 dot x 0, SOP of T1 dot D 0.0, T1 dot B false, T1 dot S is nothing but null. T1 dot S is the null. Completed, right? T1 dot S null. Okay, next, do you know instance variables also known as, sir, can you tell either any other word for instance variable? Instance variables also known as object level variables. Instance variables also known as object level variables, or sometimes we can use the word attributes. Attribute is nothing but instance variable. Do you know in the C++, I hope, every object having state and behavior. State is nothing but the values of attributes, like in the C++ maybe. So here instance variables also known as attributes. Attributes are nothing but properties, something like properties, like add. Instance variables also known as object level variables, instance variables also known as object level variables or attributes. Object level variables are attributes. Object level variables are attributes. Okay, like clear for all of you, right? This is one thing what you people should aware. Okay, not required to keep much explanation, right? Next one, the next point, take a bit special care. This is about instance variables, right? Now the next terminology we have to talk about what? Static variables. So I hope how many points came? Hardly some 8 to 10 points came, I hope, related to instance variables are getting. Now keep submitting static variables. Static variables. Static variables. Okay, sir, here simple. Suppose assume I have class student. Now string name, class student, string name is nothing but value of, name of the student, int roll number. Sir, for every student name and roll number is there. For every student college name also there. String college name, are you getting? Name, roll number, college name is also there, ... Now I created some 600 student objects. Assume that this is the first student, this is the second student, ... 600 student objects I created, right? Next name, okay, Durga, roll number 101, college name Durga Soft. Regarding college name, assume Durga Soft. Name Shiva, roll number 102, college name Durga Soft. Next name Ravi, roll number 103, college name Durga Soft. Are you getting right? Now take a bit very special care. The value of name and roll number varied from object to object, but the value of college name is fixed for all objects. Are you getting? If the value of a variable not varied from object to object, then never recommended to declare that variable as instance variable. What is the problem? You may ask, what is the problem? Simple. Sir, here have you observed? For the first object, a separate Durga Soft is required. For the second object, separately Durga Soft is required to create. For the last object, separate. Unnecessary memory waste, performance is going to be down. Sir, how many Durga Soft string are required to create? 600, because instance variable means for every object a separate copy is required. That's why 600 times same copy, memory waste, performance is going to be down. That's why if the value of a variable is not varied from object to object, never recommended to declare that variable as instance variable. Compulsory we should declare that variable static variable at class level. Then immediately you ask, sir, if I declare this variable as the static, what will happen? If I declare this variable as the static, what will happen? Very simple. Okay, if it is a static, at a class level only one copy will be created, college name Durga Soft, and share this copy for every object of the class. Are you getting? Share this copy for every object of this class. If the value of a variable, have you observed, not varied from object to object, fixed for all objects, never recommended to declare that variable as instance variable. Compulsory we should declare that variable as the static. Sir, creating one copy and share for all objects, or for every object create a separate copy. Which one is the correct, Anna? Are you getting? If the value is the fixed, what is the need of creating separate copy? Create only one copy and share for every object is the concept. Okay, this is. That's why make sure you people should have clarity. If the value of a variable is not varied from object to object, such a type of variable never recommended to declare as instance variable. Compulsory we should declare that variable at class level by using which modifier? Static modifier, right? Okay, add. First point. If the value of a variable, value of a variable is not varied from object to object, if the value of a variable is not varied from object to object, not varied from object to object, if the value of a variable is not varied from object to object, then it is not recommended, then it's not recommended, not recommended to declare variable, not recommended to declare variable as instance variable, not recommended to declare variable as instance variable, not recommended to declare variable as instance variable, as instance variable, as instance variable. We have to declare such a type of variables at class level. We have to declare such a type of variables at class level. We have to declare such a type of variables at class level. By using, we have to declare such a type of variables at class level by using static modifier. We have to declare such a type of variables at class level by using static modifier, by using static modifier, such a type of variables at class level by using static modifier. That's all. Completed, right? Sir, what is instance variable? What is static? Can you tell the basic difference between instance variable and static variable? If it is the instance variable, how many copies will be created? For every object, a separate copy. If it is the static variable, how many copies will be created? Only one copy will be created at a class level, right? Are you getting? Add. In the case of, second point, in the case of instance variables, in the case of instance variables, for every object, a separate copy will be created. For every object, a separate copy will be created. For every object, a separate copy will be created. But in the case of static variables, a single copy will be created. A single copy will be created at a class level. A single copy will be created at a class level. A single copy will be created at class level and shared by every object of the class. And shared by every object of the class. Shared by every object of the class. Shared by every object of the class. Every object of the class. That's all. Are you able to understand? A single copy will be created at class level and shared by every object of the class. Okay. Next. Sir, can you tell where we have to declare static variables? Where we have to declare static variable? Static variables should be declared within the class directly and not inside a method or block or constructor. Are you getting? Static variable should be declared within the class directly but outside of any method or block or constructor. Same as instance variable, but where is the difference is nothing but what? Here just one word. Static is a word. Okay, add. Static variables should be declared. Static variables should be declared within the class directly. Static variables should be declared within the class directly. Within the class directly. But outside of any method or block or constructor. But outside of any method or block or constructor. Next term. Completed, right? Next term. Do you know when static variables will be created? When static variables will be destroyed? Okay, what is the scope of static variable? Sir, can you tell when the static variable will be created? At the time of class loading. Sir, that class file is going to load into the memory. At the time of class loading, static variable will be created. Sir, when static variables will be destroyed? At the time of class unloading. Are you getting? At the time of class unloading, static variables will be destroyed. That's why scope of static variable is exactly same as scope of dot class file. Then immediately you may ask, sir, at what time class is going to load, or at what time class is going to unload? You may ask. I will explain. First add up to this. Static variables will be created. Static variables will be created. Static variables will be created at the time of class loading. At the time of class loading, static variables will be created at the time of class loading and destroyed at the time of class unloading, and destroyed at the time of class unloading, and destroyed at the time of class unloading. Hence scope of static variable, scope of static variable is exactly same as scope of static variable is exactly same as scope of object. Scope of static variable is exactly same as a scope of object. Exactly same as scope of scope of dot class file. Exactly same as scope of dot class file. Scope of dot class file. Okay, like immediately ask, sir, when exactly class is going to load, or when exactly class is going to unload? You may have the doubt. Listen this one. Sir, I'm taking Java. Take a bit special care. Java test, like I'm taking Java test. Sir, can you tell, if I'm taking Java test, Java test, what will happen? What I'm doing? Can you please run test class? Beyond that, nothing in a single word. Execute test class. Whenever we are using this command, internally, what activities will be there? First activity, can you tell? List out some activities, what I'm doing. Java test, what will happen? Can you spell out some activities? Loading dot class file, and then creating an instance variable. No, am I creating an instance? Loading dot class file, execute main method. What we are doing? Java test, that's all. I'm not doing anything, just I'm executing test class. Whenever I'm executing test class, internally what thing is happening? Are you getting? Okay, can you spell out? First activity, Java test. Oh, JVM, can you execute my test class? Like I'm conveying to the JVM. Now, first activity, what the JVM is going to do? First, JVM should be started. Oh, start JVM, because JVM is the responsible to do. That's why first activity. What is the first activity, Anna? Start JVM. First activity, JVM got started. Second activity, okay, start JVM. After starting JVM, second activity, what the JVM is going to do immediately? Create and start main thread. Main thread, who is going to be started? JVM only. Create and start main thread. Do you know? Main thread will be created and started by JVM. JVM is responsible to start, because the total job who is going to do? Main thread is going to do for the JVM. That's why after starting JVM, immediate activity, create and start main thread. Okay, like now the third activity, create and start main thread. Now the third, immediately main thread is going to check, boss, where is the test.class file? Are you getting? Locate test.class file. Locate test.class file. Boss, test.class file is there or not? Who is the responsible to search this one? Main thread. Main thread is going to check test.class file is there or not. If test.class file is not there, then exception in thread main, no class def found error :test. So exception in thread main is the responsible. That's why in the main thread I'm getting an exception, right? So locate where it is available. Yes, my JVM, my main thread identified. Now load load tester dot class. Load, boss, it is there, load that. After loading, execute main method. Execute main method. Okay. After loading, execute main method. Main method is going to be executed. After once a main method is going to execute, after that, unload the tester.class file. Once main method completed, then that's all. The job with the test.class file completed. Unload tester.class file. After unloading, immediately JVM is going to do terminate. Are you getting? Terminate main thread. Terminate main thread, because job of main thread already completed by the JVM. Terminate main thread. Last one, shutdown JVM. Shutdown JVM. Do you know, a simple activity, Java tester, internally how many things are going to be happen? Sir, JVM will be started. JVM is the responsible to create and start main thread. Main thread is responsible to locate test.class file. If it is available, main thread is responsible to load. Main thread is responsible to execute main method. And after completing main method, main thread is responsible to unload. The job of main thread completed, main thread will be terminated by the JVM, and the JVM job already completed, shut down the JVM. That's all. A simple activity Java tester, internally how many things are going to be happen. Clear for all of you? In this total cinema, where the static variables will be created. Have you observed? After locating, load the tester.class file. Yet at this point of time, static variables will be created. Static variables creation. Are you able to get static variables creation? Where static variables will be destroyed? And where static variables will be destroyed? At the time of unloading, class unloading. That's why static variables destruction. Static variables are destruction. I hope you people can aware. Sir, at the class loading, static variables will be created. At the time of class unloading, static variables will be destroyed. When exactly class is going to load, when exactly class is going to unload. Clear for all of you, right? Okay, take this thing. Take clearly. Now I hope when the static variables will be created and when the static variables will be destroyed is the very clear for you. Next, static variables will be stored in which memory area? Static variables will be stored in which memory area? Ray, don't think too much, man. Static variables, stack. Are you getting similarity in the board? That's why static variables will be stored in which memory area? If anyone is going to use the word stack, I will give left and right. Okay, static variables will be stored in method area. Just like a heap, one more memory area is there, which is nothing but what? Method area. Local variables will be stored where? In the stack memory. Local variables are stack, but static variables will be stored in which memory area? Method area. Okay, at this point, static variables will be stored. Static variables will be stored. Static variables will be stored in. Static variables will be stored in method area. Static variables will be stored in method area. Will be stored in method area. Method area. Okay, that's all. Are you able to understand, right? Okay, so this is what you people should aware clearly, right? Okay, next, how we can access? What are various options are there? Legend this one. Sir, here class test I am taking. Static int x is equal to 10. Class test static int x is equal to 10. Now the target here, public static void main method, string array args. Sir, here can you tell test t is equal to new test? Test t is equal to new test. System.out.println t.x. System.out.println test.x. Can you tell among these which is valid, which is invalid? Which is valid, which is invalid? Both are valid. Static variables can be accessed either by using object reference or by using class name, but recommended to use class name, because by using object reference usually we can access what? Instance variable, but not static variable. That's why, so usually by using object reference we can access instance variable. Don't use that approach for static variable. Unnecessary is nothing but your readability of the code is going to be down. That's why, so we can access static variables either by object reference or by class name, but recommended to use what? Class name. But within the same class. Sir, I am in the test class only. I want to access test class static variable. It is not required to give class name also. Directly we can access, no problem at all. Are you getting the point, right? So how we can access static variable? Static variables can be accessed either by object reference or by class name, but recommended to use class name. And within the same class we can access static variables directly, not required to use a class name. Clear, right? Okay, we can access static variables. 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 Static variables either by object reference or by class name. 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 But recommended to use class name. Recommended to use class name. Class name. Next, within the same class, within the same class, it is not required to use. Within the same class, it is not required to use class name. Within the same class, it is not required to use class name. Not required to use class name, and we can access directly. It is not required to use class name, and we can access directly. Not required to use class name, and we can access directly. Directly, we can access directly. That's all. Clear for all of you, right? Okay, at this point. Class test static int x is equal to 10. public static void main. Test t is equal to new test SOP of t dot x. SOP of test dot x. Next SOP of x like. Completed, right? Next, within the class same we can access directly and not required to use a class name. Completed, right? Okay, that's all. Next one, clear. Now I have one doubt. Sir, here it is the static area SOP of x, valid or not? So static variable, and it is the static variable. From static area we are accessing, no issue. Can you tell when the static variables will be created? At the time of class loading. At the time of class loading. That's why at the beginning only static variable is ready. We can access from anywhere, from instance area, from static area, anywhere you can access, because static variables got created at the beginning only. Now public, okay, void m1 method. Within that I am taking SOP of x. Sir, can you tell is it valid or not? This one is the valid, this one is the valid, this one is the valid, no problem at all. Regarding we can access static variables directly from static area and from instance area, because static variables got created at the beginning only. Okay, and we can access static variables. We can access static variables directly. We can access static variables directly. We can access static variables directly from both. We can access static variables directly from both instance and static areas. We can access static variables directly from both instance and static areas. From both instance and static areas. Instance and static areas. That's all. Take this example. Take clearly. Public static void main SOP of x, valid public void m1 SOP of x. Completed, right? Clear for you people. Okay, next last point for static variables. Analyze static int x, next static double d static string s. Sir, for static variable I am not performing any initialization. Public static void main string array args. Public static void main string array args. Now system.out.println of x, SOP of d, SOP of s. Can you tell what are the answers or what is the values? Yeah. Ayo. For static variable, JVM will provide default values. JVM will provide default values for static variable. Yes, sir. Ayo, instance variable JVM will provide. For static variable, either JVM will provide default value. Don't keep any doubt, man. Even static variables is more standard data. JVM is going to provide much support. So for static variables, JVM will always going to provide what? Default values. We are not required to perform initialization explicitly. That's why, what is the answer? 0, 0.0 and null. Okay, take this part. For static variables, JVM will provide default values. For static variables, JVM will provide default values, and we are not required to perform initialization explicitly. Okay, that's all. Take this part. Class test static int x, static double D. JVM will provide default values, and we are not required to perform initialization explicitly. That's all. Completed, right? Okay, not required to keep much explanation, right? Next one. Okay, last point, static variables also known as, is there any other word for static variables? Static variables also known as class level variables are fields. Class level variables are fields. Okay, add. Static variables also known as class level variables are fields. Static variables also known as class level variables are fields. Class level variables are fields. Class level variables are fields. That's all. Completed, right? Now, okay, what is the next last example? Let me explain. Sir, here I am taking, observe very carefully, Anna. Can you tell what is the basic difference between instance variable and static variable? Instance variable is object level variable. Static variable is class level variable. Next, instance variable, for every object a separate copy will be created. Static variable, for all objects a single copy will be created at class level and shared by every object of that class. Okay, now keep this point in your mind and tell the answers, Anna. Static int x is equal to 10, int y is equal to 20. Next, public static void main method string array args. Public static void means string array args. Now test here, just t1 is equal to new test. Test t1 is equal to new test. T1 dot x is equal to 888. T1 dot y 999. T1 dot x 888. T1 dot y 999. Test t2 is equal to new test. Test t2 is equal to new test. So system dot out dot println t2 dot x dot t2 dot y. Sir, can you tell what is the output? Static variable only one copy. Instance variable separate copy for every object. What is the answer? 888, 20 or 1020 or 888, 999 or 10 999. 888, 20. Correct? Okay, make sure. Sir, static variable, instance variable. Which variable will be created first? Static. That's why x is equal to 10 at the time of class loading only got created. Now I'm creating an object. Tester t1 is equal to new tester. Yes, t1. Okay, t1. Tester t1 is equal to new tester. I'm creating an object, and what is the value of y? Y is equal to 20, because for every object a separate copy of instance variable will be created. Now t1 dot x 888. t1 dot x means 888. t1 dot y is nothing but 999. Next, now tester t2 is equal to new tester. Sir, I am creating another test object. t2 is the reference variable. Okay, t2 dot, whenever we are creating an object, automatically a separate copy of static variable will be, instance variable will be created, because why? For every object a separate copy. t2 dot x, sir, t2 dot x means what? What is the answer? 888. t2 dot y, what is the answer? 20 by default. Are you able to get right? 888 followed by 20 itself is nothing but the answer. By default we are going to get. Any explanation is required? Sir, here just observe. Static variable. How many copies are there? Static variable. How many copies are there? Only one copy. By using any object reference, if we change, automatically that change will be reflected for all. Instance variable. How many copies are there? Instance variable. How many copies are there? For every object separate copy. If I change for any object instance variable, it won't reflect for other object, because every object has its own instance variable, right? Clear for all of you? Very important question for the exam. Okay, take this point. Static index is equal to 10 into y is equal to 20, like clear, I hope. Completed, right? Okay, that's all. So this is so